The shutdown is over. The US is back in the game and military aid to Ukraine has been unlocked. Trump has signed the bill. Breaking news: Kyiv is receiving critically important weapons from NATO. Putin is in panic. Ukraine is getting stronger. Billions in aid and deadly weapons are in play. Russia is under fire from our allies. The Ukrainian armed forces are launching new strikes. Ukrainian drones and missiles are in action. Key military targets of the occupiers are on fire. I'll share all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. The longest shutdown in history is over. Trump has signed the bill, US federal agencies are back in action, and billions of dollars in military aid to NATO allies and Ukraine have been unfrozen after a long paralysis. Congress is back to work, and the process of approving arms sales will speed up. Now, critically important systems can once again be sent to allies. Let me remind you, due to the shutdown, arms deliveries to Denmark, Croatia, and Poland were put on hold, and some of that weaponry could have been transferred to Ukraine to strengthen the front against Russia. Billions for weapons are back in play. Political analyst Dimitro Levus, an expert at the United Ukraine Center, notes that this concerns weapons paid for by European partners under the Purell program. According to the expert, politics in the US will become calmer after the shutdown, but there are doubts that the agreements reached will actually be upheld.
But this is a kind of challenge, since there are doubts that the agreements made between the Democrats and Republicans will actually be fulfilled.
Notably, Ukraine will be allocated $500 million to purchase weapons from the US. 8 European countries will allocate 430 million euros, which is $500 million, as part of a program to purchase the weapons Ukraine needs, with funding coming mainly from European partners. The corresponding statement was published on Thursday, November 13th on NATO's website.
Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, and Sweden announced today joint funding of a package of military equipment and ammunition from the US for Ukraine, totaling $500 million as part of the NATO Diana initiative.
This decision was welcomed by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. According to him, the delivery of critically important military equipment takes on special significance as the winter period begins in Ukraine.
Our allies from the Nordic and Baltic countries are increasing funding for another package of critically important military equipment for Ukraine. This equipment is extremely important as Ukraine enters the winter months.
Trump signed the law. What happens next? Can we now hope that US weapons will be delivered to Ukraine in full? And how does the end of the shutdown change the situation in the war with Russia?
You can't run a country like this, Trump said, and ended the shutdown. The US president apparently likes to break his own records. The budget pause lasted 43 days, which is 8 days longer than the previous pause under Trump.
And now it is an honor for us to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
The shutdown had consequences not only for Americans, but also for countries dependent on Washington, including Ukraine.
Overall, this is a very serious sign, a symptom of a deep crisis within the political system of the United States itself. In today's world, where quick responses and effective work are necessary, this is an unaffordable luxury. So, yes, on the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but this is only postponing the deadlines.
While the US government was at a standstill, $5 billion worth of arms exports also froze. This aid was intended for NATO allies, including Ukraine.
The processes for supplying weapons to Ukraine were under the jurisdiction of the Pentagon. And the Pentagon, as I mentioned earlier, it was not blocked even during the shutdown. Yes, there was certainly a noticeable imbalance, a breakdown in communication, because some government employees were directly affected by the shutdown, for example, those working in the Oval Office and some related ministries. And here, indeed, the logistics of making bureaucratic decisions were at least partially disrupted.
Now that the shutdown is over, the blocked arms supply contracts are coming back into effect. But the question is how quickly all of this will actually start working.
At the same time, the process has been unblocked, and now the bureaucratic and procedural aspects will, of course, be implemented much more dynamically than before. Does this mean that Ukraine will receive the necessary weapons more quickly? It's hard to say. Here, we really need to focus more on the official position of our delegations in the United States.
The unfreezing of American contracts has also become an important signal for NATO allies.
Of course, all NATO countries look to the key NATO country, which is the United States of America, because all processes are tied specifically to this country. Both the military-industrial complex, the coordination of military contingents and military training, in short, absolutely everything is focused on the United States. And when the United States, for about 2 months or so, ends up in a kind of limbo or half position, well, of course, yes, this has a certain negative effect on NATO as a whole. And
in the Kremlin, they surely understand that the end of the shutdown is not in their interest at all.
when the United States is destabilized from within by processes like a shutdown, of course, the Russian Federation will only add fuel to the fire. That's obvious. And they will spread information and do whatever it takes to drag out this process until the states stabilize, remember about the Russians, and are able to act in a more unified way. For example, to strengthen this sanctions package or to start working on the next one.
But what's interesting is that temporary funding for the US has been extended until January 30th, although the issue that caused the shutdown in Congress still hasn't been resolved.
On the one hand, the processes have been unblocked, but this is only a postponement of the deadline regarding the issue of healthcare reform, which the Democrats are talking about its extension. They are supposed to return to it in December, at the end of December. So yes, the processes have been unblocked, but they could also now lead to other budgetary consequences. According
to economists' estimates, the daily losses from the shutdown for the American economy amounted to about $15 billion.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Assistance is already on the way. Contributions from the partners under PUR have reached $2.8 billion. 5 packages of American weapons have already been assembled. And in 2026, NATO plans to allocate another $60 billion in aid to Ukraine.
Has the aid from these packages already been provided? Or is it still in the process of being delivered to Ukraine? We are actively working on organizing and financing the next packages. This is a long-term and large-scale initiative. Therefore, the total amount of support will be significant.
According to him, this is a key element in the overall military aid to Ukraine provided by the alliance's allies.
For example, in 2024, NATO countries provided Ukraine with more than $50 billion in military aid. The final figures for this year have not yet been determined. The government of Ukraine has informed its partners, particularly in NATO, that in 2026 the country's total defense budget will amount to $120 billion, half of which will be financed by Ukraine and the other half by international partners. The allocation of $60 billion next year is a very substantial and practical support. Again, this is the PORL initiative. This is vital support.
Meanwhile, in Russia, military and energy facilities are once again ablaze, and now this is mostly being done by Ukrainian weapons. Learn more about the latest and most effective Ukrainian missiles and drones in the following segment.
Self-propelled artillery, mortars, drones, electronic warfare, shells, ammunition, communication systems, air defense, missiles. Ukraine is actively ramping up the production of its own military equipment and ammunition. Production is becoming increasingly precise, large-scale, and technologically advanced.
During this war, Ukraine has already reached a level where almost 60% of the weapons we have, the weapons our soldiers use, are Ukrainian-made, and these are powerful weapons with many advanced features.
This is no longer just a local industry. Ukraine is building its own military technological shield, a network of production lines, testing grounds, and combat units that turn ideas into weaponry. And our specialists immediately test them in real-world conditions.
The Ukrainian side is scaling up strike capabilities with a range of over 1,000 kilometers.
Let's start with drones, those small but decisive devices that overnight change the rules of war. Strike platform series of the FP family and other Ukrainian models are produced according to the principle fast, cheap, effective. Their advantages are simple design, rapid production, and tactical relevance. They make it possible to carry out precision strikes, disrupt enemy logistics, and keep enemy positions far from the front line under constant pressure.
In 2024, about 1 million units were contracted, and by 2025, production had increased to 30,000 units FPV drones per month. It should be noted that this amount, an annual production of about 4 million FPV drones, is a record figure, even taking into account the capabilities of the military-industrial complexes of all NATO countries combined. In other words, at this moment in time, the Ukrainian Ukroboronprom is currently engaged in the production of an unprecedented number of unmanned aerial vehicles. For comparison, the United States Army replenishes its own arsenal with approximately 100,000 unmanned aerial vehicles per year. The Ukrainian defense industry, I emphasize again, produces up to 4 million drones.
The technological production recipe is simple: composite fuselages, 3D printed wings, inexpensive components, and open source navigation solutions. All this makes it possible to produce working platforms in batches, but you can't cut costs on electronics. The navigation and guidance system makes the drones resistant to Russian electronic warfare. Otherwise, mass waves of launches won't break through the enemy's dense defenses. In parallel with drones, a strategic direction is also developing. Here, the key players are missiles and missile systems that strike at the enemy's rear, depriving them of fuel, depots, and command centers. Neptune is a domestic anti-ship and coastal missile system that has strengthened the security of maritime borders and given Kyiv tools to impact the enemy's logistics in the Black Sea.
Here there is an unprecedented case in world history at play. The point is that Ukraine, as a country that effectively does not possess a navy, has inflicted devastating damage on the Russian Federation by destroying up to 35% of the Black Sea Fleet's vessels at one point. According to the British side, the naval activity of the Russian Federation in the Black Sea Basin has decreased as a result of the use of strike drones and accordingly naval drones. It has dropped to a historic minimum.
Another important milestone is the FPV-5 Flamingo cruise missile. This is a fully Ukrainian development with a declared range of up to 3,000 kilometers.
For comparison, the legendary American Tomahawk has a strike range of 1,600 kilometers. The Tomahawk's warhead is about 500 kilograms, while the Flamingo's warhead is around 1,150 kilograms. The most recent documented use of the Flamingo was a strike on the oil terminal in Tuapse. Moreover, Russian public channels themselves confirmed that the Ukrainian side used these strike weapons.
By combining small drones and large cruise missiles, Ukraine gains both mass and strategy. Drones keep the enemy on edge, missiles strike critical targets, and together this seriously undermines the enemy's ability to wage a prolonged war. But Ukrainian defense is not just about small and large systems, it's also about time-tested developments like the Bogdana, Shtagna, and other artillery and anti-tank systems that provide mobility, firepower, resilience, and operate within a unified strike network. Drone reconnaissance, artillery adjustment, precision missile strike.
40% of the Russian budget depends on revenue from the sale of oil and petroleum products. Accordingly, taking into account this budget-forming sector of the occupying country, adjustments are made to the actions of the Ukrainian side, namely the use of strike drones and means of destruction. We are talking about Flamingo and Neptune in the context of neutralizing the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation. According to the Russian side's assessment, losses resulting from the Ukrainian strike on the oil refining complex of the Russian Federation are estimated at around $100 billion.
Ukraine's production capabilities are already extending beyond its borders. Through agreements and joint projects, Ukrainian companies are legalizing assembly and mass production in European countries. If before the start of the full-scale war, the Ukrainian defense industry was lagging behind, then by 2024, production volumes reached about $9 billion, and in 2025, they grew to $35 billion. Plans for 2026 include scaling up to $60 billion. And this is just the beginning. What do you think about the military aid from the US and EU to Ukraine? We look forward to your comments. There's more to come. Stay tuned for the main updates and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.